so many technical problems over the last couple of months. It's not even funny. It is really sad.
Wow. They make it look so easy online.
I was scared. Thursday night, I was afraid to even breathe.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Because I kept seeing
Okay.
yellow in my internet connection. But the other part of it too that I discovered with all of it has to do with how many devices. I got so many devices: iPod, iPad, telephone, speakers. I've got 4 speakers. All that stuff connected to your internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. We are live, finally. And if anybody's out there that was trying to watch us, I apologize. I was having technical difficulties, but it looks like we are set up now. So why don't we go ahead and get to the topic at hand. And let me welcome everyone to the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. We are reading Nothing Personal by James Baldwin with a foreword by Dr. Imani Perry and an afterword by Dr. Glaude Jr. To the essay that James Baldwin wrote many years ago. And the foreword and the afterword helped to connect his essay to current events. Even though reading the essay, you can pretty much make those connections yourself. We are in session 16 of the book group, the 16th book that we are hosting public discussions on. You can learn more about the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle on YouTube, where all of our archives are housed, and on Facebook, where we post events. And we now have a website called readingchangeslives.wordpress.com. And what else? We're going to talk about chapter 2 tonight, maybe chapter 2 plus chapter 1, however it goes. My name is Michelle Odom. I am calling in from Brooklyn, New York. And BJ.
Good evening, everyone. I am BJ Pete Graham, and here is my book, Nothing Personal. It could serve as yet another journal from Exterior Journal for me, and I am calling in from Palm Beach County, Florida.
Welcome.
I'm Georgette Moses, and I'm joining you guys from Columbia, South Carolina.
Why didn't the camera switch? Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. BJ, you all dressed up over there. What's going on?
I see my granddaughter. She has braids, and she puts the little things in her hair, and she gave me some of them, and I can't braid, so I just bunch up a whole bunch of hair and just wrap the thing around it, and I'm not dressed up. I've just been fiddling with the little gold things. I would love, Tara said, Mom, why don't you just find a braider? I don't think that I can sit that long. I can't sit more than 10 minutes with somebody doing something to my hair. I don't sit too many minutes. Something to my head. So,
I did it one time when braids were becoming popular. This must have been the 80s or something. And I was at an African shop, and I was in there for 8 hours with various women working on my head. And by the time it was all over, I said I will never do that again. And I never have.
Real commitment.
Yes.
what the hell?
Yes. Yeah. And this is before,
What were you doing
you know,
while
they had
you
a,
were doing this?
I don't even remember.
8 hours.
I don't even remember.
Paid for 8 hours. Lord Jesus.
I just remember there were like at various points 2 or 3 different women working on different parts of my head, and you know they would stop and go get something to eat, and you know so.
No.
I just don't care that much about hair, and it was, you know, the style was cute, but I don't care that much about cute.
That's okay.
That is a whole bunch of cute. Oh my Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, how these folks do all this stuff these days, I do not understand. Anyway, let's talk about James Baldwin. I'll read the very short little.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I'll read the little short intro summary that I have here. This week's discussions are inspired by chapter 2. Here, Baldwin tells the story of the time he was arrested, along with a visiting friend from Switzerland. He considers the indifference of New Yorkers who seem not to notice the arrest, how white people bully each other, and how most people hide the truth of their own feelings, even from themselves. Fear and dishonesty in America lead to Baldwin's conclusion: this is no place for love, and all that implies for the children. And then I wrote one question, and I'm reminding you guys that I ask everybody to bring one question and one passage to read and one item to share. And I do have an item to share, but I just have to start by talking about an article that I just finished reading in the New York Times about a woman who was raped on a SEPTA train, you know, SEPTA in Philadelphia. Right. Yeah. Right. About 10 o'clock at night. She's on the train. There are several other people, though they haven't released the number of people that were in the car as this man raped her. And nobody called the police.
They were witnesses.
You know, they were witnesses. And, you know, and I'm thinking about it, BJ, in juxtaposition to the article that you shared a couple of days ago and I shared today about the jailing of Black children in Tennessee, which this particular incident was focused on some children who were watching a fight. And so they made up a charge that didn't exist for failing to intervene in the fight, and they started arresting these Black children, which is a part of an ongoing pattern they've got going on there in Tennessee. But, you know, where I would have no expectation that children would know how to respond appropriately when they see something outrageous happening, it's stunning. I mean, the level of indifference that it takes to watch someone being raped, and they think that some people may have even been video taping it. So I don't know what's going on in the world, but obviously James Baldwin saw it 40, 50 years ago. And here we are.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Um, I actually heard that story on the radio in the car before I saw that article. And what is interesting, I used to live in that part of the country, and that particular train is not like a regular, but that line is not the kind of what most people imagine in commuter rail, crowded to the extent that you can't see. All you can do is stand and wait for your stop. Um, the Darby Township is a very moneyed suburb of Philadelphia. Um, and I can't imagine someone seeing something like that happen. I even went to the point of saying, suppose that had been a child who was being raped. Would they have done anything then? And then I went to that place. If it had been a homosexual rape, they certainly wouldn't have done anything. So,
And they said the man who did it was homeless. So maybe nobody in the upper crusty Darby County wanted to get their hands dirty, you know?
well, the way in which it was reported was a SEPTA employee was on the platform. He wasn't working, and he noticed something was wrong. So he called the SEPTA security police.
Yeah.
Um, but then it becomes a question of, and not all states have it, is whether or not there was a Good Samaritan law, whether there's a Good Samaritan law in Pennsylvania. All states don't have it, but which requires that if a citizen sees a crime being committed, they must do something. They must do something. Call the police, whatever. But can you imagine you're in a contained area? It wasn't like the people could run.
I can't even imagine that you would need a law to, kind of force people into having what seems like it would be a human reaction, a natural reaction.
But I raised that because every one of them ought to go to jail or something for not protecting that woman, for not intervening. I mean, it wouldn't have taken more than 5 people at one time to say, okay, we're going to stop this. And
Right.
stop it together.
Right.
hmm
Or at least call for police.
Yeah. The other incredulous part of the other story about the 8 children who were arrested in Tennessee is that they were arrested on the basis of a law that does not exist.
Right. Right.
This country is going batshit crazy at 180 miles per hour.
And that's why I wonder who we are that you can attack our children like this with no, outcry. No, it's like we should be on fire.
It almost goes back to the origin almost goes back all the way back to when George W. Bush was publicly, flagrantly stole the election, and we all knew it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That when when GOP contributors, supporters, whoever they are, bribed the Florida Supreme Court, and I happen to have known the Chief Justice at the time, and there was no way that he was going to relent, uh, to give in
Mm-hmm.
and not relent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, because it was more important to have a black Supreme Court justice, state Supreme Court justice, to him than to have justice in this country. And those are the kinds of conflicts I think that we face every day. Um, so you go there, and then you come all the way to a Donald Trump, and he is not charged with anything other than his bodyguard punched a protester. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading another story today about Bolsonaro in Brazil, where a panel has just come out with a recommendation that he be charged with crimes against humanity, homicide, and genocide for the way he responded to coronavirus, and how many people died as a result of his response. His response was, essentially like Donald Trump's. They said he was actually worse than Trump. But Trump is a killer. He is a killer. Where's our commission holding him accountable for all of that?
And the idea that we sat by and allowed him to pardon criminals, Steve Bannon, Paul Manafort, all of them. We allowed him to give a federal job to a Nazi, Stephen Miller. We allowed all of that. So when you see a woman being raped on a train and nobody says anything, that's where we are.
You asked earlier, well, what would we have done if it was a child? Another story that I did post today is a story that came out a couple of weeks ago about the new revelation that between 1950 and 1990, over 200,000 French children were sexually abused by French Catholic priests. So Baldwin talks in this essay about our fantasies around children, what we like to imagine our children are experiencing. But with our indifference, we don't see what they're experiencing. So I don't know how we fix this, guys. It's some deep shit.
That's for sure.
Well, I think we're deeper in the abyss than we have ever been in my lifetime. And one of the things that we neglect to pay close attention to is how it extinguishes all the other burning fires. That in order to cope, in order to navigate, we tend to put on a back burner. So we not only give up our obligations as humans, we give up our obligations as citizens, we give up our obligations as Black people, we give up our obligations as women, because who's been talking about Texas abortion law this week? I mean, if you line up, Gio, here I go. If you line up Michelle's postings, then you see how all the other stuff gets extinguished. I don't know. I was thinking.
There's so much.
Yeah, I was thinking that thought. You know how on the board in the airport, when the departures, they're down, one line is down at the bottom, and then all of a sudden it goes up. Then all of a sudden that goes down because something else takes over. That's what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And most people, unless they're desperate, don't watch that board because it's dizzying.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a kiosk and look on the kiosk because that board, you can't keep up with what's going up and down, and so I just I am really sad for the world.
Yeah. And sad for the children. And so my one question, and I was thinking about you when I wrote it, BJ. So Baldwin gets down to the end and he says, this is no place for love. And so my question is, do you see Baldwin's conclusion that this is no place for love as cynical? Why or why not? And I was remembering, BJ, in the beginning when you were saying you felt like Baldwin had become cynical.
He had become cynical, but I think that is his style of expressing despair rather than being cynical. Um, because he always says he despairs, he gets angry, but there is always, then he shows you the glimpses of hope that he sees. So I really think, I don't think that he believed, and maybe at the point he wrote it, he might have believed it, but then he turned around somehow. I don't believe that he did not believe that there was room and a place for love. I don't. I think that he might have understood love as should have been easy, and his despair comes from this place makes it so hard. And I think it also comes from it's a disguise of a painful peace because this person was his friend. And not only did the circumstances of the arrest and the behavior of the police snatched the friendship away because the friendship became something different. I think that Black people, when they are in relationships with white people, hope that they can put the blackness and the whiteness aside. I think that white people who want to be good people don't have a sense of their whiteness in those relationships, because very few white people do have a sense of their whiteness. They do not understand their whiteness and what it and how it flows through daily life, how it flows through relationships. Because most white people don't have a lot of black, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, uh, Afro-Caribbean, um, relationships. They may have a few, they may have a five. I mean, if I go to think about all my white friends and I count how many relationships that they have, I'm talking about close relationships that they have with black people, most of them wouldn't have more than 10, and I'm being generous there.
Mhm.
So I think that here, Baldwin has had a loss. And I think that he recognized that his friend did not see, understand, or experience it as a loss. I do think that he understood that the friend's perspective about their relationship had changed. And that's part of the despair.
Mhm.
I got to explain to your ass what's happening here. That I've got to now make an adjustment because you know something that I hadn't really explained to you, nor had the world explained to you. And it makes me something different than I was 48 hours ago. So, I've not seen in any of his other works where he talks about love, I've not seen, and keep in mind, in the intimate parts of his life, he had to be discreet. He had to be secretive. So he had to love in the dark. So love was a very different thing from what we see in heterosexual relationships of that time. You know, so um, so when he expounds, reflects on this whole thing about love, I'm not so sure that his definition wasn't actively dynamic. When you read the works of Gwendolyn Brooks, for instance, and she talks about her relationship with James Baldwin, um, excuse me, one of the things that she talks about is his intimacy is a distant intimacy. She didn't call it intimacy. That's me paraphrasing. That it was a distant one because he had to be careful. In Alabama, Mississippi, where he was hanging out, homosexuality was against the law. Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. I don't know about Georgia. I'm not sure. But it could have been used against him. And even in the civil rights movement, it was used against him. I mean, think about how he experienced love. Even the people who loved him through his secret. That's a very, very, I mean, when you think about it, I don't know what the hell I ate, but something's on my lip. When you think about it, think of it this way. What's the first thing that young people do when they fall in love? I mean, Imani can't even get home before she calls me Nani. I met this guy and we've been going out and we just went to dinner and I'm like, you want to share. Um, the reason that we hold hands, the reason that we embrace each other when you're in love, young love, new love, whatever kind of love, deep love. I mean, Steve and I don't seem to be able to walk down the street without holding hands or embracing. Because you want to proclaim your worthiness of being loved. So here's a man who he probably did not share his intimate relationships with his non-intimate close friends. I can imagine. Now, this is me imagining, and I've been imagining him for so many years. I can imagine that he'd go to the party. Let's do it this way. Lorraine Hansberry has a party. You know, one of them rent parties up there in Harlem, and everybody's having a good time. And all of a sudden, Jimmy Baldwin is nowhere to be seen. Because he done tipped off. He done got that, um, what do you call it? Gin and jive vibe and gone to take care of it. So
Thank you for that visual.
I'm just you know, one of the models that I use for, I don't know if I ever told you this about James Baldwin, and what really drew me to James Baldwin was someone who knew him. I had another uncle who I had two uncles who knew him well, and the other uncle was kind of like, I think he had mental health problems, but he was a genius. He was a musical genius, a mathematical genius. Um, he was, um, I mean, he was he was so smart that half the time when he's having conversations with the adults, they don't know what he's talking about either. But he taught me so much. I mean, and he would say, "Girl, sit your ass down. Let me tell you something." So, I mean, he was really, really um, smart, to the point where he would get in master's programs at the University of Chicago or whatever, and then um, it would his quest for intellectual inquiry and discovery would get so great that he just leave the program. I mean, he left like, I mean, he has like 3 masters and 2 PhDs. And, I mean, it was just unbelievable. But he was crazy as shit, and he was also an alcoholic and couldn't keep a job because he was crazy as shit. So anyway, Uncle Al was my model in a lot of ways. Um, he was also he was also the instrument in which I learned so much about James Baldwin. But I mean, he and James Baldwin used to hang out together in New York. Um, so um, Uncle Al was, I mean, he wrote, did something with the New York Philharmonic and the San Francisco Philharmonic. The piano playing thing was, and he could play the piano, he could play the flute, he could play the harp, he could, I mean, this man was just that smart. And one of the things that I knew even as a child was how lonely he was. Oh, and he was also gay. And I'm not even sure if he actualized his homosexuality. I'm not sure. Maybe he did. I don't know. Um, but he would really get into his gay thing, and he always hung with the women in the family. He didn't hang with the men in the family. He sought the women in the family. Um, and so I kind of like modeled my thinking about how James Baldwin operated from Uncle Al.
Mhm.
Um, and then at one point I went through my Uncle Morris, and I was wondering, I've always wondered whether he was gay or not. And even though, he had a wife, but anyway, um, I always wondered because he talked about James Baldwin in such a quiet but deep way. And he took care of him, when he didn't have any money, blah, 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 blah. And he introduced him to people that he would not normally, that would, I don't know, he was like a social engineer for him in the club life, in the tenement life, the socialite tenement, where people had loads and loads of house parties. So, um, like my uncle knew Ed Sullivan really well and had a dinner party just for James Baldwin to meet Ed Sullivan because otherwise that wasn't his thing. He was never going to be invited. He didn't have that kind of talent. But anyway, so um, the thing about Uncle Al and my Uncle Morris, um, but Uncle Al was the model for me to observe James Baldwin. And the first time my mother told me that people who read too much, people who know too much, people who are too smart carry a great burden because all those things are burdens. They press down on your soul. That's what my mother used to say. And I think she's right. I think she's right about that. But, so why did record? Oh, okay. But anyway, that's my answer. I think it was despair. And I think that I have always noted that his shroud was hope. But inside that shroud was a lot of getting real with yourself. And I also note that he had no religion.
Let's hear from Gio. Gio, what's on your mind? Did you bring a question? Did you bring a show and tell?
Yeah, I actually brought, well, I had like 3 selections.
Okay.
Show and tell, that just depends on how we were flowing tonight. So, wow, I'm just still, marinating over BJ's beautifully illustrated explanation of James Baldwin. And I have one question to ask as a follow-up to what you said. And that is, did he find it hard to communicate with people? I mean, was he the kind of person that would just walk up and start off a conversation, or did people have to come and approach him because he was busy watching the room in a, kind of protected place?
I think he wasn't for the bullshit chit chat. I don't think he socially rejected people. But I can imagine, and this is from my Uncle Al again, he just listened to and observed other people and thought to himself, you're all such jive motherfuckers. I'm not going to say a thing. And there was a lot of, during the time during his time, there was a lot of Negro pretense going on. Black
BJ,
people,
keep talking, but I want to share. I want to share my screen while you're talking.
okay. So I think that just with most people who are contemplative, that that was later in that was later. But y'all know, you see, he had great poop on. Anyway,
I think that's golden.
ever, but it ain't hot yellow mustard. But I do
I'll be right back.
that he had a sense of what he wanted to talk about, where his mind was, that most people weren't there. Not in general, but in a conversation. Um, and it's very much, I note this in myself. People could think they're talking about something real simple, and here I come and I blow all the shit up. And when you know anything, you got 15 different kinds of ways of thinking about something that people thought very simple to talk about. Because when you ask me a question, um, I'm like 20 minutes ahead in a conversation because I see all the other questions. I don't know. It happens.
Well, no, but, that's the difference between just having a conversation and having a discussion, right? Yeah. You're actually thinking and listening and learning, hopefully, so you can contribute.
So I do think that he was attuned to people that he liked. And
like Maya Angelou.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind when he was her counselor, she was going through a real tough time, a real hard time, I mean, it was, I know why she was in the cage. And trying hard to make sense of it. And then with a lot of things I mentioned that he tried to make sense of as well. I'm talking about the hard stuff. And there were, I'm sure, a lot of easy things. Um, like, I know, things like, I love Martin Luther King. I love what he's doing. But I have a couple of words that he should be saying that he's not saying.
Mhm.
I could hear James Baldwin saying, "Nigga, please, if nonviolence will get your ass killed." I could hear him thinking that.
Mhm.
Mm. And I believe you, because in the chapter where he's describing how he and the police officer are, they have this confrontation, he's like, his whole attitude is, I'm gonna give you something to take me to jail for in a minute. I'm like, this guy, James Baldwin. Okay. I'm like, all right now, he ain't no pansy. Okay, he got fired.
Yeah, in that moment you realize that when people betrayed him, when people hurt him, when people deliberately went out to hurt him, when family, when they got real up in his family, a whole bunch of really nice cussing, because I love to hear a cuss out. That's just me.
Mhm.
That he could take it there, you know. No pros, no big nice flowing vocabulary.
Mhm.
So um, I could, yeah, yeah.
Gio,
Okay, well,
what you got?
I'm gonna take you guys back to the end of chapter 1, and this is on page 15. Where the people can sing, the poet can live, and it is worth saying it the other way around too. Where the poet can sing, the people can live. When a civilization treats its poets with the disdain with which we treat ours, it cannot be far from disaster. It cannot be far from the slaughter of the innocents. Everyone is rushing, God knows where, and everyone is looking for God knows what. But it is clear that no one is happy here and that something has been lost. And so I had 2 questions for that, and that's do you people watch? And if so, what do you observe? And the second question was, do you think James was happy in France? Why? And should we leave and go to France?
You need to go someplace.
France got issues too, okay?
Problem. So worldwide. Well, I guess, in terms of whether or not I see him as cynical and whether or not I think he was happy in France. I wouldn't say cynical. But there's a sadness to me about him, and maybe it's because I feel it myself as a writer. And so when I read him talking about love, I'm never really, for the most part, not seeing it through a romantic love lens. I'm seeing him as speaking in a more universal sadness over the lovelessness in our world. And so 200,000 children being sexually abused is a lack of love going on somewhere. Watching a woman being raped on a train is a lack of love going on somewhere. Arresting Black children because it's a fun thing to do, or this is how you make your money, or this is how you express your power, is a lack of love going on somewhere. And I think that that's what Baldwin was looking at. And I think he was trying to push us to see. Yeah, I think he was very observant. And I think whatever continent he was on, he was an astute observer of human behavior. And I think he was wanting us to see what he saw, because hopefully, and I feel this myself as a writer, hopefully the outcome of you seeing what I see, because it's like the train, it's like the SEPTA train. It's like, or the picture that I used in the agenda today of the Walking Dead that he alludes to in chapter 2. It's like we're these human beings on this planet where all this crazy shit is going on. And it's like, for the most part, we're just going about our daily lives. If it doesn't touch me personally, I guess that's your problem. I don't even know if we see it. And so I think as any kind of artist, what you're trying to do is to get people to see what you see, so that hopefully it touches something in them and they start to have a reaction. Because once you can acknowledge that something is wrong, the very next kind of thought process is, what can be done about it? And so the more people who are putting their brain power to the question of what can be done about it, it just feels hopeful that maybe something could be done about it if we would actually acknowledge what we see happening in front of us. It's like you can't get through drug treatment without first acknowledging, I have a problem.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another aspect to it that you didn't talk about, Michelle, and I want to ask you about your response. There are people who aren't experiencing it this way. And what are the factors that you attribute to those people who don't see it this way, that I don't see the world as having all these problems?
Yeah, well, I don't think we're ever going to all see the same things. I think we have different life missions, we have different capacities, we have different skills and abilities, and we're never going to have all of anything doing the same thing. But it is about the critical mass. It is about the key people that need to be reached and need to be activated. And I think the work of an artist is directed toward. And it feels like those people um, don't have the level of awakeness or buy-in or whatever that's necessary to make the. I was listening, for example, to my guy, my white guy, Jared Yates today, and he was talking about he was talking about Colin Powell and that whole thing, and then he got into the whole infrastructure bill and how that's stalled in Congress, and he was talking about the climate emergency that the world is in and the level of influence that a Joe Manchin has over a problem that affects the entire world. And he was saying, it's just to the point that the United States government needs to buy out, they need to nationalize these coal industry and all, they need to just buy them the fuck out and say, here, take the money, go find something else to do, because we have got to get serious about solving these problems. It's just that far down the road. And that's the kind of thing that I mean, that how is it that we're just gonna let the planet burn up because Joe's gotta have his money? And everybody's not going to respond to that. But who are the levers of power? Who are the critical mass of people that could make a logical idea like that happen? Mm-hmm. And how do you turn them on?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I thank you for responding, Michelle. But I also hear in your response the same kind of futility that James Baldwin would undertake and be influenced by and saying, I'm getting the fuck out of here. I mean,
except I think in Baldwin's day, you could still go to France and feel like you were having a better experience. Our white lady friend, Caddy Richhoff, shared some articles after the event on last Thursday about the prevalence of neo-Nazis in Germany. Mm-hmm. But she didn't want me to get too comfortable feeling like my grandson was safe there, right? But that's the thing, whatever this global criminal cabal we have going on here, they've set it up so there's really no place we can go where we can feel safe, which to me just says, then that means this is the battleground. Then that means this is where we stand and fight.
Mm-hmm. To that point, after the war was won, Germany and Poland still referred to the Black children who grew up in Germany as the children of the cursed. There are a couple of, I watched a couple of YouTube documentaries about Black people who grew up in Germany during the Nazi occupation and the reign of Hitler. It's really interesting that you bring that up. But also you bring up the idea, I mean, I certainly considered about 3 years before I retired, which was the beginning of the Trump administration. I looked at Cuba, Barbados, Ghana, Tanzania, um, even the Bahamas. My concern was that because of my um, underlying medical issues, that I not be too far away from the doctors that I already trusted and already knew this long, complicated medical history and implications and all that stuff. So, um, we went to Cuba to test the waters of how quickly it was, you know. So I really considered getting out of here because the the the, the Trump administration had just really worn me out and down, and I could see that conservative edge was happening even in Massachusetts, which is why Massachusetts ended up with a new Republican governor. I mean, Charlie Baker is not really a Republican. He is a
Republican what?
Republican governor.
Oh, jeez.
But Charlie Baker is a progressive Republican. I would. He's loyal to the Republican Party. He wasn't loyal to Donald Trump. He protected Massachusetts citizens from Donald Trump, but he's still a Republican. He used to be the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield. So I did consider it. I tried to go where not Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was doing well in this country. He was doing really well in this country. James Baldwin was starting to get a lot of lecture opportunities and make money. Um, but, it's a difficult thing to do because you can't say what's Tweedledee and what's the difference between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I even talk with the Social Security Administration people, and I talk with the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, about if I lived in a foreign country, did I still get my deposits the same way if I were in the U.S.?
You were out.
What they say.
Yeah, you do. You do. The lady said to me, it's like if you were working at the embassy. You get a bank in Ghana, and you're working at the American embassy. We do wherever you tell us to send the money. So um, it was an interesting time period. And I'm sure they all went through that. Look at you shared the picture of Maya Angelou. Maya, all intent and purposes, for a long time, for 5 or 6 years, maybe even 10 years, she was back and forth to Paris. Um, I'm probably sure she had an apartment there or something. So. Um, you know, and you didn't see black people going to Italy because and I lived in Italy for 6 months, and Italy is a very racist place. I mean, the racism and it's not white supremacy, it's just racism. They don't like people uh, are dark skinned, whether they're Italian, American, or whatever. And they treated biracial children um, of war badly. So, I mean, even somebody said, well, why don't you go to Moscow for a while? Shut up. Who the hell want to freeze to death in Moscow? Damn.
Not me.
I know. So, you
The
know,
choices are limited, but even to the extent that you can find someplace where you can live your days in peace
mhm.
as an
I think that
individual, you know.
Black people um, have also chosen to live in isolation. Um,
In the country or outside of the country?
in this country. hmm I mean, think about it. When you think about it, there's a great deal of isolation that we put ourselves in. I know that I have lived in isolation since I moved to Florida. Um, I'm I don't want to make no friends here. I just want to come home, do my gardening, do my barbecuing, tinker, tinker, tinker. Um, nah, son, I'm good. you know. um, I mean, like I live in Boynton. I haven't been to the Boynton Mall yet. you know. Um, I go to the beach. I'm always hunting for places, the butchers and the pastry and the bakeries and stuff like that. But that's what we do. We hunt. We found this one bakery and you have to be there before 8 o'clock in the morning because all the old people done been there and bought up all the shit. But um, so I think we have found a way. Um, I'm a good example is my daughter. She moved into this new neighborhood, new town, and is probably 98.7% white. But she needed to be closer. Now that Miles is gone and Imani's gone, she needed to be closer. She needed to have Mason in school closer to her office so she could get to him. So anyway, I asked her, I said, well, have you met your neighbors yet? She says, I haven't met them. I don't want to know them. Just leave me alone. And she often, at her age, says stuff like, you know what, I'm just done with white people.
How old is she? Well, if you don't mind telling.
Oh, and she's 40, 40, 44, 45, 46, one of them 40s. Damn.
But I can't say nothing because I have to think about my children's ages for me. Man, so
Well, the thing is, I only have one. But anyway, uh, and you hear that from them.
that is so
You know, and
interesting.
what? Yeah, I think that's, I said one time, I said to her, sometimes you ought to have a little thing get together for your team from work. She says, Mom, I'm not inviting them people in my house. When I leave work, I'm done with them. I said, even so and so, the young woman you talk about all that. She said, yeah, her too. I go to lunch with her every now and then, but it's not gonna run that way. Whereas when I was at the point she is in her career, I was always having some kind of professional social thing, whether it was a catered dinner or whether it was go to the restaurant and I'll pay for it, whatever, you know. So um, it's very different. I look at Stephen. Stephen worked in the same office for 40 years, and he thinks some people his relatives or something. I mean, every time I turn around, it's a baby shower, and I got to get a wedding gift, and um, I mean, you know, so um, and I think it also has to do with a consciousness, you know. Um, Stephen and his people for 40 years and all them young white girls and oh God. But anyway, he grew up in Boston. And I think that makes the difference. Um, so, um, I mean, and Tara grew up in Boston, but I was a heavy influence in her life, and I was Southern. And that made a difference in the way she perceives, the way she responds to what's going on now. And as she was growing up, developing her own social culture. But I like that passage. I read that 2 or 3 times that you shared, Gio. I think that is one of the most important parts that he uses to turn this essay.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Because if you have a civilization where your most creative people have no voice, they feel strangled, stifled, chained down. What good are you? And I think they kind of I was thinking about what he said his Swedish friend said, which was, he had the impression he didn't see anything so special about New York. And yet New York is like, it's a city state. It's like Rome. It's a cultural center, right? A financial center. And that should be, where artists and creative people would go, much like Paris, right? To be accepted, to express themselves. And yet still you have this clamping down on them because of particular social mores, right? A racial element, a class element. And it just made me wonder, well, what is there about Switzerland that made it wasn't so special? What's the big deal? I've never been to Switzerland, so I don't know.
I think people, New Yorkers, and Michelle could speak to this better than I can, but my sense is that New Yorkers really buy into the idea that New York is the center of the world. I think people who don't live in New York, I mean, I was appalled in my first, one of the first black women that I met when I went to college. She talked like she was from New York City. She kept talking about the city. We got to go to the city, blah, 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 blah. And she was from Jersey City. What the hell city are we talking about here?
That's because, and I can say this because I'm from Newark, we kind of, it's all the same.
I know.
New Jersey is a suburb of New York.
I know. And and I used to say to her, okay, I can see that because Miami, when I was growing up, was the closest largest city. And I went to Miami a lot, but it's still, during that time, it was an hour and a half drive because we didn't have 95. Once we had 95, then it became an hour and 15 minutes. So many cars. I don't know. So, um, but I think that New Yorkers who really claim the city, quote unquote, are people that don't understand that the real orchestration is about New York being a cultural hub to accommodate the international financial system that is New York.
Yeah, right. What's that
Yeah.
song from that musical, Money, Money, Money?
Yeah.
Makes the world go round.
Yeah, yeah. It's like um, black people lived in Brooklyn and the Bronx, and black people used to try to tell you that black people were only in Harlem, or give you that image or that impression. You know, I never. Um, I love New York. Don't get me wrong. My daughter loves New York. Loves New York, and that's partly because when she was in junior high school and high school, I used to have to go to New York a lot. So we just get in a car, drive to New York, stop by New Haven, and sometimes go over to Newark. Um, so she thinks she's a New Yorker. And for some reason, she always presents it as New York is a better deal than Boston. I don't know. Like, oh, I'm getting out of this town. I'm going to New York this weekend. Whatever.
Well, those places, I have to
What
say,
happened to Michelle? Did she
I
lose
don't know. She
connection?
keeps them. Maybe it's her internet. Um,
Yeah, um, yeah, she's not even on here. It's not like she closed the screen. I'm wondering if she can get back in.
hope
Are we
so.
still live?
Yes, we're still live. So
But the
something,
recording stopped.
right?
Okay. Well, I know she wants us to finish up by a certain time. So what are you sharing? What did you?
Okay. Well, I'm sharing because we're kind of on the New York theme.
Mm-hmm.
A video of Alicia Keys singing Marvin Gaye's "Trouble Man," and I picked it. I was going to use the original, his rendition, but I liked what she had to say about the song before she started, which made me think about the influencers, artists, poets, writers who have showed each generation
Uh-huh.
how to speak about their life, what's going on around them. And then that's something to be transferred
Uh-huh.
and interpreted. So I guess I
So
will. You want to go ahead and share it? Let me see. This will be my first time doing this, so let me see if I can get it right. Okay. All right, now I can figure out how to unshare. Oh, that was share. All right. You like it?
Yeah, I did. I had never heard her doing that. That was great. I'm headed to download it. Uh, I'm
Okay.
feeling everything. That now, talk some more about why you chose to share that.
Well, when she began, well, when I was looking at James Baldwin and some of the things that he says, the imagery is in New York kind of gritty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things happen to you, and especially if you're not in the power structure, things that happen to you. So you coming up hard, but you still have to try to make a life for yourself some way, and find something good about your existence, even though people are telling you that no, you're not worth it, or something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so um musical artists who sort of their songs exemplify that kind of struggle to me are Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield. Um, hmm, I can't think of the other person I was thinking of. But when I was, the phrase just came to me and said, "Oh, Trouble Man." That sounds. And then I googled the lyrics and I looked at the lyrics and they're like, "Wow!" Because I had never, I kind of heard the song Marvin Gaye sing it before, but I'm like, I never really delved into the lyrics of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is the Black experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially in an urban setting like New York, um, and which is kind of described by James Baldwin. And so his song came up on YouTube when I Googled it. But then I saw Alicia Keys. I'm like, oh, well, let's see what a younger person, what kind of spin they have on it. And I just clicked on it. And when she talked before the song, performing, she said that Marvin Gaye, right, was one of the people who showed them, people of her age, how to talk about what was going on around them in a way that people, well, she didn't say this part, but in a way, inferred it, in a way that goes across boundaries, right? Class and race, um, boundaries that people can understand. People will understand music before they understand your words. People will understand an art, a piece of art, or a dance performance before they will read, a tome about your experiences because they might not care. But if you can catch them, something about the music, the mathematics of the music, the mathematics of the movement, the frequency of it, then maybe you've dropped some kind of enlightenment into them. You've made a connection with them some way that in the future would change somebody's life or the choices they make. And so that's why I picked that, because she said something that was, well, right on, right? She hit the nail on the head. You have to look at the people, the artists, the writers, the poets who've come before to see, how to do this thing. And then you put your own spin on it for the time and place that you're in, for the people that you want to reach. And so we've got to keep doing that. And we can't let our younger children, who are like the articles that Michelle shared with us, are being constantly traumatized, right? They're being preyed upon. We can't let them fall through the cracks, their voices not be heard, not give them the tools to express themselves in a positive, creative way to get that trauma out, because it's in there. So, yeah.
That was a great share. I really enjoyed that. I think that was just so highly insightful.
Well, cool.
I missed it, but I'm going to watch the live stream, which I think continued through all of that. I think I need a new router. I'm going to look at that this week because I really had a hard time getting back on this time. It's not usually. Yeah, but at one point I kind of came in and I heard some New York bashing going on. What was that about, BJ?
We're not bashing you yet.
Yeah, wait till the New Yorkers out of the room.
Well, it started off with James Baldwin's friend, the Swedish guy saying, well, I don't see what's so special about New York. And then we just went off on that.
Yeah, we did. We went a little bit there. And particularly around, I'm trying to shut down something that's going on my computer now. All of a sudden, I'm hearing like somebody's jumping in water, a splash. But we were talking about the idea that for New York, there's a great deal of capitalistic propaganda that goes with the image and the culture of New York. And most of it doesn't have to do with Black people. That culture is around creating a social and a cultural moniker for what New York really is, and that is the capital state of the world. So that's all. Not New Yorkers, because y'all from Jersey City and Newark, and even people as far as, what's the name of that place? White, not Whitehall.
White Plains?
White Plains?
White Plains. Calling themselves New Yorkers. Shut the hell up. Y'all way the hell out in the boondocks.
Wait a minute. I have to admit, when I was a kid, I used to think that New York City was New York. I didn't know it was just a little teeny part of a whole tremendous state that reached all the way up to Canada.
Yeah.
Which is country, okay?
Yeah. It's really interesting that you bring that up, because when I was little and they would talk about, what the hell with this thing? Y'all hear that?
I heard that, yes.
I hear it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to go out and come back in. I hear it too. It might be something about, because I told you I got all kind of craziness going on over here. So I'm going to go out and hopefully come back in.
Got my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
And while you do that, I'll go ahead and I'll share. I walked all over the place trying to think, what could I thought, show and tell was like you had to hold up something.
like kindergarten.
Yeah. So I was thinking, these glasses. That 3 years ago, these were my everyday glasses that I needed to have clear vision. Now they don't work. And what I was thinking is that I think that the work of James Baldwin progressed, and his algorithms and his calculus and his formula for how he saw things, his lenses changed. And it was not only in time, but it was also in where Black people were in our experience, in our collective progress. And also within the landscape, the place, what I call the place in which Black people live. I don't get what I don't get what's going on with my computer. But the passage, it's almost like I got, that's the sound that I have when there's email coming in.
So is
So
your
the
email
passage,
program open?
I think this thing with that says partly cloudy thing, that um, you know, um, I think it's a Microsoft thing. But the passage that I chose from chapter 2 was around the same thing after he thanks his friend warmly. Um, and mentions that this man has a void in America. Uh, he writes, for one thing, talking to Americans is usually extremely uphill work. We are afraid to reveal ourselves because we trust ourselves so little. American attitudes are appalling, but so are the attitudes of most of the people in the world. And this goes to Michelle's overarching theme here tonight about our world. What is stultifying here? Only Black intellectuals use that word, stultifying, But anyway, is that the attitude, I mean, that used to be a conversational word when I was a kid. My parents used that word all the time, stultifying. Their friends use that word, stultifying. I used to hear it in the meetings and everything all the time. Here is that the attitude is presented as the person. One is expected to justify the attitude in order to reassure the person, whom, alas, one has yet to meet, who is light years away in some dreadful private labyrinth. And in this labyrinth, the person is desperately trying not to find out what he truly feels. Therefore, the truth cannot be told, even about one's attitudes. We live by lies, and not only, for example, about race, whatever by this time in this country, or indeed in the world this word may mean, but about our very nature. The lie has penetrated to our most private moments and the most secret chambers of our hearts. Nothing more, nothing more sinister can happen in any society to any people. And when it happens, it means that the people are caught in a kind of vacuum between their present and their past, romanticized, that is the maligned past, and the denied and dishonored present. It is a crisis of identity. And it's such a crisis, at such a pressure, it becomes absolutely indispensable to discover or invent. The two words here are synonymous: the stranger, the barbarian, who is responsible for our confusion and our pain. I think I could read that like 4 or 5 times and have to still pull it apart. And that's why I presented the glasses. Because one of the things he talks about in this essay, which is my share thing, okay, um, can you all see my share thing?
Yeah,
Okay. So, in my share
it's coming in.
in my share thing, I started doing something. Baldwin talks about witness. There's nothing that he has written where he doesn't speak to the idea of witness. So I started, I don't know if it's a book, I don't know if it's an essay, I don't know what the hell it is. I started writing because he talks about liberating yourself into a truthfulness so that you can, moving yourself into a truthfulness so that you can become a liberated witness. In this essay, he makes he presents us with that concept of being a liberated witness, that it's not just enough. So I started this Witness from the Badland. And the first entry is Witness Liberation. And I wrote, when we look back, I assess the import of those who inspire, it says inspirited, but it's a draft, inspired the opening of the portals to each of the paths. Parents, teachers, community leaders create the search for the door. The impressions left are ongoing and narrow in most aspects, and most times alter ego focused. I am ever grateful for the illumination of the Black ancestors whose life's work transcribed the great long Black struggle. They who etched through their philosophical narratives prose, political and cultural speeches, testimony of the horrors and victories of people determined to be free. We experience them through their voices, books, publications, and lectures. Their strength overwhelms our containment, sends a charge up the core of our understanding. For it was them who liberated my witness. In exchange and gratitude, I spent a great portion as a Black woman reading, rereading, observing the people of whom they wrote. Some portions along the way, giving voice, opening doors, developing venues to educate, train, and creating a universe of advocacy as an act of obligation offering to those who witness on my behalf. So, and you notice that I used an African medicine wheel. I always put an image in front of me to go back to focus, I guess. But in any case, he talks about this liberated witness. And it occurs to me as I think about his work, as I think about what he's written here, that he is asking for a different kind of witness than most of us are. He's asking for not a recorder, but a translator. Translating from a language that was formed out of knowledge, information, blood, sweat, and tears. Okay, so that's my share.
Thank you.
I just don't get what that noise is. And I can't shut it up. So anyway,
Michelle, are you frozen? Oh, I think she's frozen.
I don't know what it is. Ever since I opened up the Chrome, maybe it's Michelle that we're hearing that noise. No?
Oh, let's see.
Okay, oh Lord. I thought I had found the,
The program that might have been causing it.
I thought I had turned it off. But evidently I didn't. It's a program that's built into Windows, and it announces your damn email when you're getting email.
Okay.
But that's the first time that it's happened because I closed my email. I don't know what the hell happened. So Michelle had to go back out again?
Yeah, I think she froze, so her internet might have fallen off.
Okay. Just a news update. The January 6th committee voted to refer Steve Bannon to Justice Department for criminal contempt. Let's see if Merrick Garland does anything about that. I doubt it.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I think that this is a really contemplative um, book.
I agree, and I like your use of the glasses of the different strength, because it's like you I almost have to come back, right, and read it again
Hmm.
and see
Hmm.
what you interpret.
Yeah. It this thing is running me crazy. I have it on turn off.
Are you back, Michelle? We don't have a video for you.
She had to go back out again.
Well, she came in, and but now we have no. She's gone. Um,
Here she is.
are you frozen?
I'm wondering if she's just did I just hear something?
Has she tried to text you or something?
No.
No. Let us know. Um,
It looks like it might freeze when she's trying to record.
yeah.
Yeah, she's not being able to um I hate to you see if you can see, I don't know. Maybe Geo, we should, it's 8 o'clock, so maybe we should just end it and Michelle can working on, getting it together. But it's just so satisfying to be able to talk through this book with people I trust.
Oh, I really enjoy it. And I have to say, I probably wouldn't have had the same amount of understanding of his words without both of you. And I think mhm.
You would. You just have to read it. Um, you know, like um, I don't know. Do you have you read any of Octavia Butler's work?
Oh, absolutely.
Some of
The
Octavia Butler's work. I get to a point,
uh,
then I have to go back almost 3 or 4 chapters. Yeah. Um, and that happened to me in Beloved. When I got to the point where I understood what had happened,
mhm,
I had to put the book down for a couple of hours, and then I started all over again.
I understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, for those of you who have been listening, thank you very much, Gio. It's great to be in conversation with you on James Baldwin. And we'll be right back here next Tuesday night at 6 evening at 6 p.m. for chapter 3. And um, I have everything closed. It was telling me something about my USB. That was an alert that was going on. So um, you can find us on Reading for Change. Help me out, Gio. Do you have the website open? Did you turn off your mic?
No,
Oh,
no, it's still working. No, I was
okay.
fine. Um, so,
But we're here each Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we thank Michelle for her hard work to keep us together, to help us choose books, and look forward to more discussion on this book. Good night, Gio.
good night. Have a good week.
You too. Bye bye.